Up zombie companies. Are you arguing to let airlines, for example, fail?
Yes.
Propping up zombie companies. Are you arguing to let airlines, for example, fail?
Yes.
Propping up zombie companies. Are you arguing to let airlines, for example, fail?
Yes.
Propping up zombie companies. Are you arguing to let airlines, for example, fail?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. This is Dick Lucas, and this is Shooting from the Hip number 8. We got a lot to cover here. We have 2 interviews. This is the first time we are doing interviews live on the No Gradient show on Shooting from the Hip. But let's do a quick rundown here. So we have a lot of questions. I'm going to talk about there's a lot of things going on right now. I have a lot of questions about, and I'm not going to give answers, but I think it's important in times like this, we ask the right questions. Howard Marks, as you guys know, love covering him. He's got a memo we're going to cover. Interview with Massachusetts Chief of Staff State Rep. Collin Fedor will be on. New York Times editorial board. They had a piece on tech that I thought was dead wrong. We're going to talk about possible COVID treatments, Bill Gates and his building 7 factories. We're going to talk to Silvia Bettini. She is an Italian citizen. We're going to get her hot take, boots on the ground, how she feels about what's going on there. We're going to The Economist has a couple pieces on the bailouts. We're going to talk about. They also have a piece on the grim calculus, having to make the decision between the economy and lives. These are questions worth talking about. And then I want to take questions from y'all. So as this goes on, as always, we have Charlie, Finch, Finley in the chat room. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, fact checks, if I'm wrong about something, call it out there. I'm going to address it at the end. So right now, me, Charlie, we're fucking in the zone right now. We're gonna do the show, but towards the end, and I'll let you know. We're gonna get to your questions. This is Saturday, Saturday noon Eastern. We're live. And it's available wherever you get your podcasts as well. I want to shout out Johnny Allard, my fucking boy from middle school, and Jack Lucas became Patreon supporters. Really appreciate that. There's a link in the bottom if you want to support the show. Supports me and Charlie. We really appreciate it. Okay, so let's get into this fucking thing. Charlie, you let me know if the audio is okay. You let me know if you have any issues. We have the call with Collin Fedor, 12:30 Eastern. And then 1 o'clock with Silvia, who's an Italian citizen. We're going to hear from her. What could possibly go wrong? A couple live interviews. Let's fucking riff. Okay, so here's some of the questions I've been thinking about. Again, we've talked about this on the show. We're dealing with a lot of firsts. We're dealing with a first global. Well, we've had a pandemic before. Humanity's dealt with it before, but at this scale and not since for decades, we haven't experienced something like this. And we haven't dealt with the fact that we've had unprecedented government intervention in keeping the economy going, not just in the United States, but elsewhere. So there's a lot of things going on right now. We talked about this last week. It's very difficult to make conclusive statements, especially with COVID and the economy. It's hard because we're in the middle of it right now. So I think the most important thing right now is to ask the right question. So I'm just going to riff on some of the things that I've been thinking about, and I don't have answers to these things. I do want to some of them I just haven't had time to do the research on it, and I'd be curious if anyone has any good resources in the comments to link to. But these are just things that are floating on in my head that I want to get off my chest and see what you guys think about them. Okay. So here's an unknown right now with COVID. We don't know the reinfection risk of COVID-19. Early indications are that it's not mutating that fast, but that remains to be seen. This is an unknown. This is something we can't conclusively say right now that will greatly affect the course of this virus. So as an example, tetanus, that takes about 10 years. You get a tetanus shot every 10 years. That takes about 10 years before it mutates enough that you need a new shot, a booster shot. right? So we think we don't know if this is a tetanus thing. We don't know if it's something that's going to mutate a lot faster. The flu, for example, mutates a lot faster. So we don't know. This is where we're dealing with. It's a big question we need an answer to. That unfortunately we don't have the conclusive answer yet. We also don't have the answer how many people are infected. And this is really important. We've been doing testing capacities at about 150,000 a day in the United States right now. Countries are doing a better job testing, but we don't know how many people have this Fukin thing. And we're going to talk more about that. But that's really important because broad-based testing, even those that don't have the symptoms, right? We need to test them, and also hopefully later test for antibodies as well, so that we can test people that have already had it and that no longer have it. But that number is extremely important, because without knowing how many people have it, we don't know the case fatality rate. If this turns out to be a lot more infectious than we thought, then that means that it's a lot less deadly than we thought. And that's going to help us make decisions about this. So if it turns out if a lot more people have already had it, that's going to affect policy. That's going to affect how we think about when we open things up. If it turns out a lot of people have already had it, then that allows us to maybe open businesses up more, open the economy up more or earlier, make decisions like that. So that's a really important question. Okay, so that's regarding COVID. Here's regarding the economy. So what is the effect of governments being so willing and being so willing and setting a precedent that when shit hits the fan, they will be there? So the last time we had an insane amount of government intervention in the markets was the global financial crisis. And that was really a big first. There were bad Fukin loans. Rating agencies did a poor job determining the risk on those loans. Those loans went Fukin bad. The whole housing market imploded, and a lot of bad shit went down. And then what happened? Well, the government stepped in. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing a very similar thing, except on a much bigger scale now, to fight off the economic effects of shutting the economy down and shutting businesses down to prevent the spread of COVID. So what are the effects of the government being so willing to do that? Now, again, I'm only asking questions right now. I'm not saying the government should not be doing these things. I'm not saying they should be. I'm just, these are things I'm thinking of, because it's hard to give conclusive answers, because we are in a brave new world of government intervention, and we just don't have the historical data to determine, is this the right thing? Should we be doing this? So here's another thing I'm thinking about. I'm just going to rapid fire these things. What is the effect on capitalism with so much government intervention? How is it that the government actually funds stimulus? I still haven't wrapped my head around this. So here's a quote from Steve Mayer. He's a senior advisor to the Fed's board of governors. The Fed does not pay with paper money. Instead, the Fed pays the seller's bank using newly created electronic funds, and the bank adds those funds to the seller's account. So that sounds to me like they're basically money's coming out of thin air. Now we do. Other countries buy our debt. Private citizens buy the debt of the United States. That is one way to raise money. But there's also a way that the Fed can just essentially print money. So this is happening at an unprecedented scale. So what is the effect? What is the effect of this? I don't know. And surprises me the mainstream coverage on this. Wall Street Journal, New York Times, The Economist. It's hard for me to find kind of assessments on what this could possibly mean. And a lot, Howard Marks, for example, which we'll get into his memo, he's not even really giving his prognosis on it. Now, he has mentioned it before. He's talked about this before, and he says he quite plainly says we don't know the effect of it. And I think he's absolutely right there. But I think it's worth talking about, because I don't think enough people are talking about it. So another thing I'm thinking about, how is it that the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, has so much leeway without being beholden to, Congress? So the Fed is an independent body, right? It's doing a lot of things to stimulate the economy. So the Congress passed the CARES Act, which helps stimulate the economy. and the Fed is also doing actions on its own. So what I'm grappling with is the Fed is able to now. They just started buying. They started this week. They announced they're going to be buying junk bonds, so below investment grade bonds. And what are the effects that I don't think Congress didn't pass something that gave them the power to do that. They made the decision they need to do it, and it's just an interesting thing. It's an interesting thought that we didn't elect the people that are running the Fed, right? I'm not saying we should elect them, but it's just they have a lot of power to do these things, and it's really making me wonder. Okay, so another thing, and we talk about this a lot on the show. Why is it that an individual is expected to have a rainy day fund? So I recommend 6 months, and we talk about this. I recommend having basically 6 months rainy day, if possible, to be able to weather not only economic storms but personal storms. Shit hits the fan, you lose your job, you have an unexpected expense, et cetera, et cetera. So why is it that it makes sense for individuals to do that, but then when companies, rather than companies, a lot of these companies, we'll get more into this, rather than them try to stockpile a bunch of cash, which is good for individuals to do, they were using that cash to do share buybacks. And again, I don't think share buybacks are categorically a bad thing, but it is a question that I'm thinking about. They're doing it to fund share buybacks, and at the same time, they're making this cash to buy their own shares back, which does return money to shareholders, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself. But at the same time, they're doing this. They're also raising a bunch of debt, so they're getting more into debt while buying their own shares. It seems a little weird that they wouldn't just want to have billions on hand for a rainy day when shit hits the fan, so they can weather the storm. I just it just kind of blows my mind. Okay, so also I've been thinking about, is money too cheap right now? The Fed has consistently kept interest rates super low to stimulate economic activity, and Trump has been a hawk, always encouraging keep rates low, keep rates low, keep rates low. Well, riddle me this: Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google raised less than $45 million combined before their IPO. These are the biggest tech companies in the world, besides Facebook, which raised about $1 billion. They raised $45 million. So how is it that these companies now, this isn't not adjusted for inflation? So $45 million back then is worth a lot more today, but it's not worth billions. Now, tech companies today are raising billions of dollars before they go public. Now, part of that is the private markets are more mature, and I totally get that. But part of it makes me wonder: is it that money is too easy to come by? Is it that money is the Fed, by keeping interest rates low, is allowing cheap money to flow into the system, which is creating bubbles, and it's creating waste. You have fucking startups with they haven't even got public yet, and they have super nice offices. They're paying everyone out the ass. It makes you wonder: is there's too much froth in the system? So another thing. So the Fed announced that they're going to base which bonds they're going to purchase based on what the rating agencies gave on, I believe, March 22nd. So what that means is they're using these rating agencies to affect their policy to stimulate the economy. Now, these are the same rating agencies that during the global financial crisis were saying these fucking mortgage-backed securities were AAA, AA, fucking AA rated. They were very safe investments, and the whole thing went kaput. And these rating agencies also get compensated based on how they rate these securities. So if I'm a firm trying to sell dog shit investments, I'm going to go to the rating agency that's going to give me the rating I want. Now, obviously, the rating agencies can't, they have to be careful. They can't just give everything a AAA because then no one will listen to them. They have to keep some semblance of a reputation. But it kind of blows my mind that the rating agencies that were asleep at the wheel, that were one of the pivotal reasons that the global financial crisis even happened, now the Fed is going to them and using them as a benchmark for which bonds to purchase. Now, again, I'm not saying they shouldn't do this. I'm just saying these are the things that are in my head right now that are blowing. It's just kind of blowing my mind. Okay, so there's also there's also this notion that what is the message that we're sending? What is the message that we're sending to the companies? So there's this notion of a moral hazard, which you heard this term moral hazard. Basically, it's a lack of an incentive to guard against risk. Okay, so if we're telling these companies that we're not going to ever let you go bankrupt, are they going to maybe manage it a little less well as they should? Now, granted, that's not exactly what's happening, right? This is I get this is a pandemic. This is unprecedented, which therefore calls for unprecedented action. But it does make you wonder: would if the government was less willing, if they were less willing to keep interest rates low, if they were less willing to intervene during the global financial crisis, would these companies now that are suffering, would they have saved a little bit more cash? Would they have been a little bit more would they have done a better job with how they were managing their companies? Maybe. Maybe. So here's another thing I'm thinking of. So why not allow these, and this is something that Chamath Palihapitiya, that's that interview that I introed with, that little clip, he was saying on CNBC, and he said, let these companies that go bankrupt, let the airlines fail. And I'm not saying we should do this. I'm just saying this is his perspective. But let them fail. Bankruptcies don't mean people lose their job, right? If a company goes bankrupt, it doesn't mean, oh, it shuts its doors and it's gone. PG&E went bankrupt in San Francisco, and they're a power company, and they're still delivering power, and they still employ thousands of people. A bankruptcy doesn't mean the company's gone. What it does mean, though, is that people are going to lose money, but not necessarily the employees are going to lose their jobs. Now, it depends on bankruptcy's it's a full-on process. You got to decide how to divvy up the assets. If that's what you're going to do, you got to decide who gets what. It is a process, but it doesn't mean that the company's over. Plenty of companies have gone bankrupt and are still functioning today. So it does make you wonder. So what if this stimulus, what if in the United States we had universal health care that wasn't tied to employment? And what if instead of these companies getting bailed out, the money flowed, the stimulus money went directly to people's bank accounts and the people that need it. So if you get unemployed, if you're unemployed, boom, you get the money that way. You don't give it to the banks first and then give it to the loans, then give it to the companies, blah, blah, blah. I just wonder, I'm sure there's a good reason for why that's not going on, but I'm asking the questions. It kind of blows my mind. During this huge bull run of the last decade, huge bull run since the global financial crisis of Fukin stocks going through the roof and earnings Fukin going through the roof, these companies were buying back a shit ton of shares rather than prepare for a rainy day. And a lot of who benefits from these share buybacks are the managerial class, the people that are running these companies. A lot of their compensation is based on share price. So rather than invest in the long-term health of their company, they can use the extra cash to buy back shares while raising debt. And this is what some of the airlines did while raising debt. And then they get comped out. And then boom, shit hits the fan. They didn't have a fucking rainy day fund. And bada bing, bada boom, the government's going to come and give them super attractive loans to bail their asses out and keep them afloat. These are complicated questions, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have the Fed shouldn't be doing what it's doing right now. I'm just saying that I'm surprised that there's not more questions around it being asked. I'm almost so surprised we don't know who voted yes on the COVID bailout. It's called a voice vote, which they usually do for minor things, and again, they were trying to rush it through, and I get that, but shouldn't we, at the very least, our Congress people know, us citizens know which of our Congress people who voted yes on this and who voted no? We should at least have a record. And right now, The Intercept had a piece on this. They're trying to figure out who voted yes and who voted no. So it's an interesting. I don't think that's too much to ask. And I get we were trying to rush this through because people, things were on the brink. We're trying to keep shit going. We're trying to act fast. But it really makes me fucking wonder why. I'm asking questions here. And the thing that the one counter kind of counter that I keep sitting on, and I hope to answer some of these questions in later shows, because right now there's just a lot swirling around right now. I hope we'll have time to debrief on some of these things, because these are questions, these are complicated questions that are I don't expect, I'm not just going to just rattle off. These aren't 2-sentence answers. There are trade-offs. Remember, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. Or who can forgot who said that, but we've talked about that on the show. So yeah, these are the things in my head right now, and some of these questions are unknowable. We don't know the effect of these bailouts. We don't know the effect of pumping this much money into the economy. We can't know the effect right now. These things we have to let play out, and it's gonna take a little bit. So I just want you to know these are some of the things I'm thinking about, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But these are very, very interesting times right now. And the one thing I will say is that these are public companies. So these are companies that when people have retirement accounts and 401ks and pension funds, if the government helps them, they're helping your retirement, right? So it's not as if they're only helping these companies and none of that flows down to the people. A lot of us rely on these companies to do well and to remain solvent and to do good work in order that we retire. That's basically how this works. Now, not everyone has money in equities. Some people don't even have a retirement. But if I didn't have any money in retirement, or I didn't have any equities, I'd be looking at these bailouts going, Jesus, how am I getting the benefit at all from this? Except in the case that, of course, some businesses that get these low interest loans can then keep me employed. A lot of them have stipulations like that, which is absolutely a direct help. But it is a tough pill to swallow, and it scares me. And we're gonna talk a little bit more. Economist has some of these answers, kind of. We're gonna talk about this. Okay, so as always, Howard Marks, he put out a memo. And then in about 8 minutes, we're gonna have Collin Fedor on. He's boots on the ground, chief of staff for Massachusetts State Rep. So we're gonna get some of his take on what's going on there. But okay, this is Howard Marks's memo. It's called Calibrating, and he's really good at laying everything out. He focuses mainly on the markets, but he also talks about what's going on. What's going on with the actual virus. What do we know about it? So his thing is right now he released this memo earlier this week. He says, as he always says, we have a wide range of possibilities. So here's what he says: future scenarios comprise a large number of variables, today even more than usual. It's relatively easy to build a spreadsheet listing the many things that will contribute to the future and rate them as likely to turn out well or poorly. But merely toting up the pluses and minuses won't tell you whether the future will be favorable or unfavorable. The essential element is figuring out which ones will be most influential. That's often where optimistic and pessimistic biases come in. So I love that he laid this out, because this isn't just related to the virus or the economy right now. This is everything in life. I think most people agree on a pros and cons list. When you're dealt with an issue, they agree on a pros and cons list. They agree on the strengths and weaknesses. Where they disagree is the weight of each of those strengths, each of those weaknesses, each of those pros, each of those cons. Basically, what they disagree with is the effect of each of those. So yes, they might agree that yes, this is a positive, this thing's a positive, or that's a negative, but they don't agree on the extent to which it is positive or to the extent to which it is negative. So that's really where a lot of these things differ. So he also said, as I wrote last week, in which way now? We have to consider our situation in the context of unprecedented uncertainty and the total absence of guidance from analogies to the past. Okay, so he's absolutely right. And that's why I like Howard Marks. If he doesn't know something, he's not going to just boom, flat out say it as fact. Okay, he's going to say, he's open with saying I don't know, but he does have some answers in this that he gets, and I'll get to those. That he's showing his cards a little more than he usually does. So he also quotes something from Doug Cass, who says, when the time comes to buy, you won't want to. So a lot of people say, they're trying to time the market. But the reality is, when when everyone's losing their shirt and everyone has, when everyone's super fearful, that's the time that those things that are affecting them and those things that are affecting the stock price or the market, just the overall market, is going to affect you. It's going to affect your opinions, and it's going to affect your ability to be able to, frankly, fucking sack up and actually put your money into the market. Now, it's a tough thing to do. You can't just look at this in the vacuum and think, okay, well, when the market's really bad, that's when I'll put the money in. Well, when the market's really bad, you're going to be scared, and that's why it's low. Other people are scared as well. So I just thought that was pretty legendary. Okay, so here's another piece here. He says, in my opinion, however, there's simply no room for certainty in investing today more than usual. Okay, we're losing some papers here. Okay, so he goes on. He says, one way to think about the balance between offense and defense is to consider the twin risk investors face every day: the risk of losing money and the risk of missing opportunity. So those are I think, plainly, those are the biggest risks right there. There's losing money, putting your money in the market, and then it going fucking down, and then missing the opportunity cost of you don't put your money in the market, and the market goes all the way up. Now, for most people, this isn't a fucking. You don't need the vast majority of people don't need to worry about time in the market. Just put your money in on a regular basis. Keep contributing your 401k, your IRA. Don't even think about the market. But I do like thinking about these things because I think they're super interesting. Okay, so given these new conditions, I no longer feel defense should be favored. Yes, the fundamentals have deteriorated and may deteriorate further, and the disease makes for risk. Remember, I'm the one who leans towards the negative case, but there's a big difference between a market where no one can find a flaw and one where people have given up on risk-taking. And there's a big difference between one that's priced for perfection and one that allows for bad outcomes. So he's basically at the point where he's saying he thinks right now is actually a good time to go on the offense, which means start making moves in the market, which means start putting in the market. Now, he's not calling the bottom, and he talks about this. For every purchase, do you insist on being sure the thing in question will never be available lower? That is, that you're buying at the bottom. I doubt it. You probably buy because you think you're getting a good asset at an attractive price. Isn't that enough? And I trust you sell because you think the selling price is adequate or more, not because you're convinced the price can never go higher. To insist on only buying only at bottoms and selling only at tops would be paralyzing. I mean, think of this, screw the markets. Think of buying a t-shirt. Think of buying a phone. If the deal is good, if you think it's a good thing, you're not thinking about, oh, the price could change, it could be a sale. Maybe sometimes you are, but for the most part, you're going in, you're buying the thing, and then you're fucking out of there. So he takes that approach to the markets. Listen, there's value right now. Companies are absolutely cheaper than they were. So now's not a half bad time to put your money in. Now, again, regular investors, you should just be like me. I'm not changing anything. Just always just keeping the game plan no matter what the market's doing. Okay, so, and we got, in a few minutes, we're gonna have Fedor in. Charlie, don't bring him in yet. You're gonna call in. We're gonna be a couple minutes late, probably around 12:33. Here we go. So Howard Marks goes on. He says, as for the current episode, here's some data from Gavekel Research's monthly strategy piece for April, bearing on the question on whether the bottom was passed in March. So we're talking about the market bottom. Markets rarely clear after one massive decline. In 15 bear markets since 1950, only one did not see the initial major low tested within 3 months. In all other cases, the bottom has been tested once or twice. Since news flow in the crisis will likely worsen before it improves, a repeat seems likely. And here's some data from my son, Andrew. So then he goes on to talk about the times the market has shat itself and then come back. So typically when it starts coming back, it then goes down again. Now, just because something happened in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen again. Maybe it's not going to go down again. Who the fook knows? But it's worth pointing out that oftentimes it starts coming back and then it fucking gets dropped off. Okay, so Charlie, you're going to give a call in 2 minutes. We're going to patch Fedor in because I'm just wrapping up here. Okay. Gavekel's and Andrew's data tell us markets rarely rally in a straight line. Rather, their movements represent a continuous tug of war between the bulls and the bears, and the result rarely goes in just one direction. After the optimistic buyers of the initial dips have responded to the low prices and bought, the pessimists find the new higher prices unsustainable and engage in another round of selling. And so it goes for a while. Thus, as Oaktree's Wayne Dahl points out, it took until mid-May 2007, or almost 7 years, for the stock market to regain the September 2000 highs. And it took until mid-March 2013, Okay, Fedora, we got him on the line. Hold on. I'll patch you in, Charlie. Don't call me yet. We just got one more minute. So almost seven. And it took until mid-March 2013, or 5.5 years, to regain the highs of October 2007. So we all remember the global financial crisis. So the highs were in October 2007. It took until mid-March 2013, 5.5 years later, to reach those same highs again. So that's why I tell people, don't put any money in the market. I don't just say 5 years. Don't put any money in the market that you think you'll need within 10 years. Give yourself plenty of buffer, because it often takes several years for these things to fucking rebound. And you don't want to be caught in a position where you have to sell equities at fire sale prices because you need the cash. That's why I recommend buffer. And that's why I don't know why these fucking companies weren't doing the same thing, but for some reason, me and you and the Johnny Pencil Pusher down the street has to worry about this rainy day fund. But these guys get the fucking loans from the banks. Now, from the government. Now, again, I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm asking the questions, people. Okay, so the bottom line for me is that I'm not at all troubled saying markets may well be considerably lower sometime in the coming months, and B, we're buying today when we find good value. I don't find these statements inconsistent. It's possible the markets keep going down. It doesn't mean there's not good value today. If you have money on the sidelines, if you've been trying to time the market, it's a good time to put the money in. That's his point, and I think it's a fair one. Charlie, let's get Fedor on the line here. We have Collin Fedor. He is whoops.
Arguing to let airlines.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna turn speaker on. Okay, Fedor, let me just cue you in real quick. Let me turn the gain up here so that people can hear you. Okay, we have Collin Fedor. He's a Massachusetts state chief of staff for Massachusetts state representative. I want to have him on because he's boots on the ground. He's doing work, and I like hearing from people that are actually with the teeth to the fucking grindstone, the rubber to the fucking road. Collin Fedor, thanks for coming on, brother. How we doing, brother?
Richard, thank you so much for having me on. It's a blast.
I love it. You're going to be a regular correspondent. So tell me, what's going on? What are the problems you're thinking about? What are the problems? How are you thinking about your constituents? How are you thinking of? What are the things you guys are doing right now?
Yeah. So one of the first things I want to say is, while I feel like I'm living and working this stuff every day, I'm far from the boots on the ground, the people who are, the essential workers going in the hospitals that have to wear the masks, that have to work at the grocery store. Those are the essential workers and the boots on the ground. I'm lucky that I just get to work from the kitchen table.
This guy's running for president one day. Continue.
But seriously, so I think that we have a great appreciation for them. But in terms of what I'm seeing, I think you've covered a lot of the sort of like economic aspect of things in terms of on a local basis. And the way that I think about it is in two ways. There's the public health focus and the economic focus. So I'll focus more on the public health side, since you kind of touched on economics.
Perfect.
There's really three things that I've been seeing here in Massachusetts. And in my role as state representative, I work for a state rep who's been working on the House's kind of COVID-19 response team, their working group. So we've been thinking a lot about this stuff, both in terms of how the House is going to function, like how do you vote when you can't have more than 10 people in a single room, and then also sort of how is the state going to respond from a public health and from a sort of an economic development, recovery, labor aspect of things. Right. So the first thing that's been happening that you've been seeing a lot of coverage is how these governors are really stepping up. And so a month ago last Friday, or yesterday, the Governor Baker, Charlie Baker here in Massachusetts, announced the state of emergency. And in doing so, it kind of gave him a lot of executive powers to basically prepare for the surge. So I think that what we're about most is we're hearing about this quarantine. We're hearing about this staying at home. And what does that mean? It's to like, quote unquote, flatten the curve. But in anticipation, a lot of people are going to be staying at home, but we also need to plan for what that's going to look like. So here in Massachusetts, as of yesterday, we had almost 21,000 cases with over 100,000 tests that have been conducted. So we're pretty high in terms of the amount of tests that are going on, but we have almost 600 deaths and nearly 2,000 that have been hospitalized. And while that's a lot, it continues to rise, and yet we expect even more between kind of now and April 20th, which is when they're calling the surge based on these projections. Is
that the surge countrywide it's looking like, or is that specific to Massachusetts, April 20th?
So this is specific to Massachusetts. I think that what we've been hearing is like there's so many different hotspots, and based on population density and state responses, you can't really do a nationwide sort of
Right.
surge projections. So over the course of then, he helped identify about 14,500 beds that are going to be made available, 11,000 of which are kind of existing. So you have your Mass General Hospital that's doubled its number of ICU beds, or Beth Israel Deaconess that went from 77 to 102. But then they've also been 3,500 new beds have been developed at some of the exhibition centers. So you're seeing the National Guard and a bunch of like local healthcare providers kind of come together and set up makeshift hospitals so that they'll be able to have enough room to take care of people as this sort of
Yes,
surge.
and I wanted to ask about that. I'm glad you brought this up. So a couple weeks ago on the show, we were talking about the U.S. Army, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I forgot his name, but he was on, and he was talking about how he's working with FEMA, and how it's up to states to identify sites where they can put like hotels, exhibition centers, as you said, where they can identify sites where people. Where the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers can come in, retrofit it like a hospital, ICU capability type stuff, but it's up to the states to identify those sites. Now, he was mentioning working with Cuomo in New York. Is Massachusetts? Have you guys been working with FEMA on this? Have they been helpful? Are you privy to those things?
I think that they helped to drop off some supplies for the one that was out in Worcester in Central Mass,
Okay.
but that's largely been a setup between the state's National Guard, UMass Memorial Medical Center, which is the major hospital system out in Worcester, and a lot of the providers in the community over there. So there's been a lot of state efforts, and I think that here in Mass we're kind of lucky in by virtue of having a large healthcare economy, and a lot of people are kind of stepping up to the plate. So you have Partners Healthcare that stepped up in Boston and basically set up this New Hope Boston Medical Center and the Exhibition Center, and they're staffing it. And that touches on some of the other things that the governor's done is basically waive a lot of licensing requirements to try to encourage more people maybe to come out of retirement or come from other states to try to help out during this surge where it might not be as much in their state, but then they can come help out here in Massachusetts. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing that's really been that I've been noticing a lot of, and that the state's been trying to figure out, is this idea around long-term care facilities. So you have I think that for you, for me, for a lot of people, we're thinking about sheltering in place as a way to prevent the spread for us. But for a lot of people who live in a nursing home, or if you're living in a group home, or in a recovery center, you're not going to be able to have that same sort of access. And what we're seeing here in Massachusetts is that's one of the hotspots where people can't necessarily isolate or quarantine, or they're asymptomatic and spreading it amongst nursing home residents. So more than 40% of the state's deaths are from those long-term care facilities.
Got it.
And that's become a serious concern for a lot of people, because if you're in a nursing home, that's where you're already at higher risk, because by the time you get to that point, you're more frail, you're elderly, and you're more susceptible with a lot of of those conditions. And I think that that's where we've seen a lot of the deaths that have been happening in Massachusetts, and it's been heartbreaking to see because we're trying to get testing, and so they're literally going to every single nursing home in the state to try to test everybody and try to determine who's safe and try to prevent those tragedies from happening. But I think that that's what's been really heartbreaking on a day-to-day basis, is seeing those numbers come out and hearing those stories has been tough. It's definitely been tough.
Right, absolutely. So I think, are you optimistic at this point? Do you think it's too early to tell? Do you think we understand that this April 20th is when it's going to peak, and then after that it's about management? Are you confident in the capacity? Do you think it's going to be okay, or where's your head at with this? Because for me, 2 weeks ago is kind of when I was like, oh shit, but now it seems I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was. I'm more optimistic now than I was then. So I'm curious where your head's at.
Our numbers continue to increase on a daily basis, so I think that we're just taking it day by day, and we're seeing these continue to rise, and you can't be more prepared. One of the last things that I think is really kind of where we've been thinking about is on the racial and ethnic disparities aspect.
Right.
language barriers are a huge a huge issue here in Massachusetts, where there's over 1.5 million that have been foreign-born, and over 500,000 of those people speak English less than very well, according to the U.S. Census. So we're seeing sort of hotspots in those long-term care facilities, but also in communities of color and with larger immigrant populations. For example, the city of Chelsea, which is just outside of Boston, large Latino population of about 40,000 people. And 80% of those, the people who live there, are considered essential. So they're the ones that are, going to the grocery stores. They're the ones who are basically cleaning those hospitals and making sure that they're decontaminated and safe.
Right.
And they're reaching an infection rate that's equivalent to basically New York City. So while the state as a whole is doing fairly well, and I think that that's the point that I'm noticing, is that for like you and for me, we're staying at home and we're doing fine.
Right.
We're knock on wood for the most part.
Right.
But for some of these populations, like not only that, the city itself, while Massachusetts has a pretty good rate of insurance, it's nearly 98% of people in the state have health insurance. In Chelsea, over 7% are uninsured. So not only are a higher percentage of those people going to hospitals, but they're not covered. And while there are a lot of insurance companies that are stepping up to kind of cover COVID related issues and those treatments, not having insurance leads to a bunch of other issues that kind of complicate it when they're receiving treatment.
So I know that.
For example,
hit me with the example.
One more thing. In Mass General Hospital, on a normal kind of basis,
Right.
Dr. Joe Bettini, who's one of the directors there, said that Latinos comprise about 9% of the hospital kind of population. And he said now they're seeing it upwards of 35 to 40%. So you're seeing a huge, huge increase and surge already among these kind of pockets of populations. And I think that language barriers are a certain issue, kind of the structural access to healthcare and certain treatments that we've seen in the past are kind of magnified right now. And so I think that that's one of the things that we really need to be thinking about. And that's what I think, that those kind of pockets, again, of the long-term care and of these sort of traditionally overlooked populations are where we're going to see some serious issues in the future, in the next couple of weeks.
So I know the federal government announced policies where and you touched on this with the insurance companies, that people that were not insured, they could go into a hospital and get care for COVID related things without worrying about the monetary cost to them, that would be covered. Are you seeing the federal government help people in your state, or is that something that's coming into play?
So I know that one of the things that our governor has been concerned about is the state had ordered about 1,000 ventilators from the federal government about 2.5 weeks ago, and we've received, I think, 200 of those. One of the other issues that we had ordered, I think, 3 million PPE, the personal protective equipment, through BJ's, and that got seized at the Port of New York. So we were unable to access that personal protective equipment, which I think has been the number one concern of any healthcare professional that you talk to. So he basically had to come together, and the governor was calling up people that he knew, people in the administration were calling up people he knew to try to get this personal protective equipment. Ended up calling Bob Kraft.
Right, I was just going to ask.
Patriots to literally charter the Patriots jet, fly over to China to pick up the masks, fly Massachusetts, we could have enough personal protective equipment, at least in the short term. So those have been distributed based on hospital supply and where people might be needing it. But I think that the states had to get the governor and the administration, and so it's been Governor Baker, but then he set up the COVID response command center, which is headed up by Health and Human Services Secretary Mary Lou Sutters. And so we've been in close contact with her, and she's been doing a great job kind of leading this charge alongside Governor Baker and the Lieutenant Governor in terms of coming up with making sure that the state facilities just have what they need. And it's a constant battle. Right
on. So I appreciate you coming on, Collin Fedor. One more question. What is something that you're seeing that has been covered in the media that isn't quite mapped to what you're seeing? So is there something that you're seeing that's kind of in public discourse that is actually different, or that you have a different opinion, or is actually happening differently in the state than what's actually being reported? Is there any discrepancy there?
Yeah, I think again, just this idea that it's starting to look a little bit better. I think it's looking better on the whole in some populations, but you're going to see those hotspots pop up, whether it's by geography or whether it's by sort of living situation. You're going to see that. And so while we're feeling like our staying at home is working among the population as a whole, there's going to continue to be those hotspots of people who aren't going to be able to either stay at home, or you're going to start seeing those increases of cases there.
Epic.
So I think that it seems like things are letting up, but on the whole, we have a lot of ways to go.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I think you put it because I've been, I think, probably a little bit too optimistic right now, but I appreciate you weighing in on that. Okay, Collin Fedor, Chief of Staff for a Massachusetts House Representative rep. What's the rep's name again?
Her name is Denise Garlick.
Nice, right on. Okay, Fedor, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it, brother.
Thank you.
Epic. Have a great day. Okay, that was Collin Fedor. That was our first No Gradient History live interview. We appreciate him weighing in. Okay, so now we're going to get to, let's just move this here. Damn, we got to move the umbrella. We'll move it in a sec. Okay, so now we're going to get into the New York Times had New York Times editorial board had a piece on the technology companies that I think that they just got dead wrong. So oftentimes, I think the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, I think these are great publications. I think they cover a lot of the times they do good journalistic work. A lot of the times it's the op-ed pieces, it's the editorial stuff where I just think a lot of the times they're either pandering or just in my opinion straight wrong. So I'm not one of those. I'm not here saying we need to media. We need to fucking the fake news media and all that. No. They do good journalistic work. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. And I specifically think they're bad when it comes to their op-ed. Basically, when you're given a fucking hipster a MacBook and in a cafe and just letting him or her just type their whims to get the Twitter followers and to get the clicks, and that's when I think there's an issue. In my mind, that's not actual journalism. That's people sharing opinions on things, which are often, in my opinion, they're baiting. They're there to get clicks. And this is one of it's worth talking about. So New York Times editorial board had a piece. This was on April 7th about thinking about the privacy, digital privacy, when it comes to how much we're relying on technology companies right now during this pandemic. So here, I'm going to quote them throughout this. So, but there's a saying in Silicon Valley: if the product is free, you are. And they link to a description of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So a lot of people love saying this. They think they're super smart. They're saying, and by the way, in 13 minutes, Charlie, let me know if we're all good. In 13 minutes, we're going to have Silvia Bettini come on. She's an Italian citizen, and we're going to get her take. We're going to get her feelings. We're going to get her experience and what she's seeing. Okay, so a lot of the times you'll hear that, yeah, if the product is free, you are the product. People love saying that. So here's my issue with that. Number one, just because the product's free doesn't mean that they need to please the user. They need to make products that you actually want to use, or else they're not valuable. So it's not as if you're the product. They still have a product, okay? You're not the product. And the other piece of this is that when they say you're the product, that means that they're selling your data. People love saying Facebook's selling your data, Google's selling your data. Here's the deal. Google and Facebook do not sell your data. Okay, what they do is they use the information about you to target ads to you. It's not as if Facebook and Google have a portal that I can go on and give them $1 million and say, I want data on Johnny Pencil Pusher from Pennsylvania. I want to know his weight. I want to know his age. I want to know his sexual preference. I want to know what he does on the weekends. No. That does not happen. Okay, that's not a thing that happens. Now they link to the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And this is that thing, and this was something this was what allowed that the company, they got a bunch of data from Facebook users. Now I admit this is a bad thing. I'm not saying it's bad, but this is the thing that you may remember that allowed that Cambridge Analytica allowed to send targeted ads to people for Trump's campaign. Now here's the thing that's missing from that. Part of the reason that Cambridge Analytica was able to get all this data. Way back in the day, people were bitching about how Facebook and just tech companies in general, but there's a definitely level at Facebook was that they're a closed it's a closed product. It's a closed. They don't share their data with anyone. No one can compete. They don't open up their APIs. They don't allow other people to tap into their graph. Remember, graph used to be a thing. So Facebook said, okay, we're going to allow you to get information on our users so that you can build your own products off our social network and you can thrive and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we cried so Facebook would open up their data. They did that. People abused it. And then this is what fucking happened. So there's always trade-offs to things. When people love throwing solutions around and saying this is the solution. No, it's not a solution. It's a fucking trade-off. So what happened when Facebook did that? Well, Cambridge Analytica was allowed not only get your data if you gave it, it was allowed to get your friends' data. So if you gave it permission, it could then go into your friends list and give all their data. Now this is agreed. This is not cool. But this type of API access hasn't been allowed for several years. You cannot do this. Facebook closed this a while ago. You cannot do this. You cannot do this today. Facebook's not currently selling your fucking data. They're using your information to you with ads, which is two different things. I think that gets lost in the noise. Okay, so this is another hilarious thing. They say, and the FBI warned that Zoom was susceptible to a form of digital hijacking known as Zoom bombing, following incidents where hackers joined online meetings to harass participants with racist or graphic taunts, raising the specter that personal user data might be vulnerable to. Okay, so yes, this is an issue. You should not be able to join other people's meetings. A lot of these, their meeting IDs, they needed to either make the default case where you have to accept someone in the meeting or use a passcode. A lot of these things were the default settings that Zoom had. So here's my issue. Like, yes, these are things that need to be fixed, but isn't it, what they don't talk about is the fact that Zoom is now allowing a ton of people to continue to do business, continue to teach, continue to do all these things because they have the best audio, video, chat product, bar none. It's insane. Zoom doesn't get any credit for that. They don't get any credit for scaling from 10 million to 200 million users. They are providing absolute value to people. And we're talking about people can join the meeting and scream at you. It's like, yes. I'm not saying this doesn't need to be dealt with, but the fact that this is the main thing. Again, this is what we talked about earlier, pros and cons. I agree that this is a con. The New York Times editorial board agrees this is a con. But they weight it way too much. I think the pro of being able to allow 200 million users to communicate very well across borders, across geographies, I think that deserves a lot more weight than people being able to join the meeting and potentially show porn or whatever they're going to do. It's like, yes, that's bad, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as it is good that Zoom is allowing all these people to communicate. Okay, so we talked about default setting. Okay. With regards to selling data, I want to talk more about this because if you don't want to talk about selling data, the DMV actually sells your data. That's a government organization that sells your data. Now, this came out, I think, what was it, like 6 months ago? They were selling companies could buy personal information about you from the DMV. This is a government institution. So my thing is people talk about we need to regulate the big tech companies. We need the government to come in and data privacy and all. They throw around buzzwords. Oh wow, we had a low flying hawk right here. That's pretty beast. That's epic. They throw on these buzzwords like data privacy and we need to break up big tech and we need regulation. When I hear that, it makes me cringe. Here's why. No amount of regulation in the world, no amount of government intervention in the world is going to prevent your data from people getting access, or rather, people you don't want to getting access to your data. When I say people, I'm talking about governments. Obviously, it's concerning. Companies shouldn't be able to do whatever they want with your data. I totally get that. But what did the government? The U.S. government, and I think the United States is a great country, but I always love sharing. This case. On March 12th, 2013, the United States Senate Select Committee on intelligence hearing. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon asked Director of National Intelligence James Clapper if the NSA, again, this is in 2013, he asked James Clapper if the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans. What did James Clapper say? No, sir, it does not wittingly. Then in June 2013, just a little bit after that, the Snowden leaks came out. Remember the Snowden leaks? This showed that the NSA was doing bulk data collection on millions of Americans. Even if they didn't have to target you, you didn't have to be guilty of a crime, you didn't have to be suspected of a crime. The United States government was collecting data on you, and they were using the big tech companies to do this. But these some of these tech companies did seem to know about it, and some of them did not. The U.S. government was just swallowing all this data up. And they didn't. There was no regulation that said that they could do this. There were these secret courts that gave Fukin warrants that were not in public, that allowed them to do a lot of this collection. A lot of it was just they were just swallowing. They were just getting as much data as they could. They were getting call logs. They were getting location data. They were getting as much as Fukin could get their hands on. So this is my point. My point is, assume that any message you send that is not end-to-end encrypted can be seen by not by everyone, but basically everyone, by governments or by hackers. So anything on Google Hangouts, anything on text, assume it's all. If the government said, "Yo, we're going to regulate it so that they need a warrant," no, I lost faith in that. I do not trust the government not to snoop on me. I don't even trust necessarily tech companies not to snoop on me. Here's the only thing I trust. The only thing I trust is technology, is code that is verifiable, that no one can read my message. And I'll give an example. Signal by Open Whisper Systems. I talk about this app a lot. And in 4 minutes, we're gonna have Silvia on. We're cue her up, Charlie. We'll be good. Signal, Open Whisper Systems. It's an open source app. It's end-to-end encrypted. Now, the message, it's pretty amazing how this works. But it's public-private key cryptography. But it's an open source app. You can know, look at the code. You know it can be verified because it's open source that people are not able to read your messages. Not anyone besides the person you're sending them to. Not the government. Not even Signal. So I don't even trust Open Whisper System. I trust that the code that they put out, that it's open source. I trust that. That's what I trust. And another thing, Fukin WhatsApp uses this same encryption protocol. Now, granted, WhatsApp is not open source, so it is feasible that they could look at your messages. But here's the deal. With regards to Signal, which is open source, the FBI has sent them a message request, like, "Yo, we need access to this data." All Signal, and they released this. They released this on their website. They said this is all we could give to the FBI, and they are compelled to if they can. This is the real test. They are compelled to if they can. The only information they could give up was the account creation time and like the last connection time, something like that. They literally don't even know. They don't even have, when you send a message on Signal, they don't even know where who the sender is. So it's called sealed sender. So when I send it, they don't even know who it's from. They just know where that message is going. And similar with Facebook, WhatsApp has 2 billion users. It's end-to-end encrypted. As we currently know, right now, there's been no case of people getting into WhatsApp messages. There hasn't been any leaks that the FBI has been able to do that. Now, it's possible to find out later that this is the case, but there's been a pretty fucking good track record with WhatsApp. And here's another example, the proof in the pudding. Facebook's trying to stop fake news with WhatsApp, right? Stop the spreading of, in India, there was some viral messages. People forward things in India. People are actually getting lynched. Facebook can't. The Indian government is telling, "Yo, you do something about this." They can't even read the message. There's nothing. They can't know if a message is fake news or not because they can't read it. Now they can do some things with links that are being shared. They can kind of peer into that a little bit, it seems. But with messages, they cannot do anything. All they can do is limit the amount of messages that you can forward to people. So the proof is in the pudding right there. And also, so I use WhatsApp. I do trust that it's end-to-end encrypted. I do believe that Facebook cannot read my messages, but I also don't back it up to Google Drive, because if you back up your WhatsApp messages to Google Drive, they are totally. That means that they're totally. Anyone can. Well, Google can read them. That means the U.S. government can read them. That means the U.S. government or any government around the world can just give Google a FUCAN warrant, and then they'll be forced to give up that. Now, same thing with iMessages. Apple talks a lot about privacy, and I always talk about this. If you have your iCloud, if you have your keychain backed up to iCloud and you back up messages, those messages can be read by Apple and by the U.S. government, because you have your keychain backed up. Now there's something here with the PIN code where if you set up a new device, you may need a PIN code to do that, to get your previous messages, but it's not quite clear. It's a little hand wavy, and plus Apple's also working with the Chinese government to house iCloud, a state run cloud company. So all Chinese citizens in China, Apple has servers. Apple has servers that are housed by this state run company presumably so China can get access to all the Chinese citizens' data. So here's the one takeaway. If anyone besides you and the person you're talking to, and I'm talking strictly about messages, there's other things with regards to data that are important too, but I'm talking strictly about messages. The only way you can trust that no one else can read your messages is that only you and the person you're sending it to can read them. If the company, like if Facebook or if Google, if they can read your message, even if it's encrypted between you and Google, even if a hacker can't necessarily get into it, Google can read it. That means the U.S. government can read it. And I would have a hell of a lot more faith in the U.S. government in regulating my data. If they didn't lie to Congress, lie to the American people about what the NSA was doing. So now I don't honestly pay attention to regulation that much when it comes to especially when it comes to encryption, because I know that the only way I know that my messages are going to be safe is if I'm using an end-to-end encrypted service and it's not backed up anywhere. It's only on my device, and it's only on the person I'm messaging. It's only on their device. But there are trade-offs. And we're gonna have Silvia in just a couple minutes. She's all queued up, ready to go. That's Silvia Bettini. Oh, damn! This thing keeps fucking playing. Who can put my phone on? Okay. So now, granted, this is a tough thing, because if all messages are now encrypted, that allows terrorists, that allows people sharing child porn, that allows people to do bad things. No, you can't get access to it. The U.S. government can't get access to it. That is a trade-off. That is a fair trade-off, and maybe that trade-off isn't. I overall think it's worth it, but it is a reasonable thing. Is a reasonable thing to consider here. So let me just we're almost ready here. Let's just get these fucking notes here. Bear with me here. Boom. Okay. So. Okay, Barlow. We're gonna get Silvia Bettini on. Where I'm just gonna be joining the Zoom call right now. We'll just hopefully this works here. Please wait. Charlie's gonna let me in. Okay. We're gonna join. Here we go. We're gonna join call to what could possibly go wrong here. We got join audio here. Okay. Okay, Silvia, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Okay. Hi, Silvia. Oh, wow. We're on video too. Beautiful. I'm not showing my video right now, but Silvia Bettini is an Italian citizen. She's also a teacher, so she's been teaching remotely. She's in Valpolicella right now with her family. So Silvia, I just want to have you on because I want to know just what are the kinds of things you're seeing, because you're in one of the epicenters, one of the early epicenters. What are the things you're dealing with? What are your friends and family dealing with? I just want to know where your head's at.
So right now, it's weird because I sat down from the computer and waiting for you, and I just saw 2 planes, and because they are starting to control. by tonight if people is going around, because tomorrow is Easter and normally Italians move a lot for Easter.
Right.
So right now they are controlling us from the sky. So the situation here is, from my point of view, it's fine. I'm doing well. I'm inside my house now since 6 weeks, and with my family, my parents and my brother, and we are leaving the house just to go to the grocery. It's weird. It's weird what we are living, because in basically 2 days, our life completely changed. And even if I'm still working, because as you said, I'm teaching from the computer and seeing my kids every day. There are moments where you stop and you ask yourself, what's happening right now? So where are we? It's difficult because we are far away from everything. We don't know, so we can hear from the news what's going on. We see every day pictures and images from hospitals, especially in Milan and in the cities where the situation is dramatic. But it's hard sometimes to understand, because we are far away. We are stuck inside our houses, and it's difficult to understand sometimes and to realize what is going on.
Right on. So how are you? And I was just talking to Collin Fedor about this before you came on, and I'm curious. Is the sense right now with your friends and your family and what you're feeling right now? Are you feeling more optimistic? It's looking like the numbers are trending in the right way in Italy. Are you feeling optimistic? Where are you? Are you feeling better than you were 2 weeks ago? Talk to me about that.
We are trying to keep ourselves as positive as we can. We must be positive right now. We cannot start to think in a negative way, because it would be a disaster for a single person, for us right now. 30 minutes ago, I was listening to the news, as every night we do, and they're saying, as you said, that the numbers are going down. But also, on the other hand, we are trying, especially like from my point of view here with my family, we are trying to see what's going on day by day. It's hard to think about tomorrow. It's really hard, because we don't know, especially comparing ourselves to the Chinese situation, where they stay 76 days in lockdown. We are optimistic, but we don't want to think too much to the future, because I don't want to have ideas and then tomorrow everything maybe will go down,
Right.
and then we will be desperate about the idea to stay inside other days and weeks and months. Who knows? It's hard.
Right. And how has, just to give, 'cause I think one of the big things going on right now is a lot of people are talking about this online teaching stuff, because a lot of students, I mean, many students across the world are having to deal with this right now. How has that been going?
It's going well. Actually, I have to be honest, it's going really well. I know that I'm a really, really lucky person and teacher, because I'm in a positive situation, and I work for a school that already had a digital system. So each students have their own iPads, and we have a lot of devices inside our schools. So since the day zero, we started with a new way of teaching, and it's going really well. On the other hand, in Italy, it's not everywhere like it is in my school, because Italian schools were not ready for this emergency. In fact, we were just reflecting a couple of days ago, and we thought, maybe this emergency will bring to the Italian school a new digital way of teaching, something fresh and something new. For us, it's going really well, and it's beautiful as person and teacher seeing my students every day. They need right now. I teach 6 and 7 years old. They need us. They need a lot of support right now, especially the kids who don't have siblings. And they want to talk so much. They need like emotional support is what I need. Who cares right now? For me right now, it's more to giving that instead of teaching, like counting
Right.
and letters. That will arrive later. Right now we have to think about that. Even if we are like school is going on and we are going on with all the activities.
Right. What and what is something that given Italy has received I think especially 2 weeks ago has received the bulk of I think the national or excuse me international news coverage. First it was China, then it started picking up a lot in Italy, and Italy's really been the main focal point for a lot of this coverage. Is there something that you've seen, given that the spotlight is on Italy, and given that everyone's been talking about it and using it as a guide for what could potentially happen to other countries? Is there something that you feel has been missing in the media coverage, or is there something that you feel is different from the media saying one thing and you've personally experienced something different with regards to your experience in Italy?
It's really hard to answer to this question because we have to think about perspective right now. And the media are giving a perspective, if you think about the hospital's perspective, that we cannot live as normal people. Like we are trusting the media because we don't have the possibility to go out. We don't have the possibility to face, fortunately, this situation. What I'm trying to do personally is to talk to people who are directly involved in this situation. I have one of my best friends. She's a doctor at the intensive care. And every week we have this moment where she called me and she described me what is going on. Because in the beginning, I think as everyone did, we were like, no, come on, it's not true. It's not possible. It's really far away from me. But then one day she looked at me and she said, listen, you have to start to do what they're telling you to do, because we are starting to open new areas in the hospital that we never thought we were going to open at the intensive care. So I'm trying, what I'm doing from a media point of view right now, I'm trying to read a lot and look at from the most as I can to have a lot of perspectives, because not referring just to one media, but different people, like media people, and talk, because I think it's hard. It's really hard to describe this situation for everyone. So I think it's really important to keep ourselves, come si dice?
Come si dice, yeah.
Like informed.
Informed, right? Yes, informed.
To keep ourselves informed. And something that I think Italians, we missed a lot in the past, trust. Right. To have a sense of trust that we didn't have before. Right now, like since when we won the Soccer World Championship in 2006, now again, I see the Italian flag outside from my window. My parents never do that. And now, something that, on the other hand, I saw when I was in Canada and in the States. So we are starting again to trust the media and politicians, because we were not so.
Right. So it's been unifying.
Yeah. Right now, yeah. Like there is a new sense of Italy that it was going, for me personally, this is my personal opinion, it was going away.
Right. National pride.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. Epic. Well, Silvia, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective. I think you're staying positive. That's all you can do, and I'm glad you came on. Grazie mille, buonasera. Yeah, I'll probably have you on again. You'll be our Italian correspondent, so I appreciate you sharing your perspective, and best of luck.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay, ciao. Okay, there we go. Let's disconnect. Boom, bada bing. Okay, thank you, Silvia. So that was Silvia again. Oh, come on. Let me move the umbrella here first. Move the umbrella. That was Silvia Bettini. She lives in Milan. But she's currently outside the city. with her family while all this shit's going down. So I'm gonna move. We're gonna take a 20-second break here. I'm just gonna move the umbrella. Get the shade moving. You know how we usually do this. And when we come back, we're gonna talk a little bit about. Well, it's 1:15 here. We're gonna talk about what are some of the possible treatments. And what are some things that I'm seeing that are making me feel a little bit more optimistic. We're going to talk about Bill Gates for second funding 7 factories, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the bailouts and what the calculus is for looking at human life versus the potential economic cost. These aren't the questions. This calculus isn't something that's really going to have to come into play right now, but it's going to come into play a month, 2-3 months down the road, and they're going to be very, very tough questions. So let me just move the umbrella, and I will be right back. Thank you. Okay. Let me just get a little sip of water right now. We got our notes right there. Okay. Also, any questions, comments, please post them in the chat. Ooh, you know what I should have been doing? I should have allowed people to ask questions. I didn't even think. Allow questions in the chat for these people that I had on, for Collin and Silvia. Next time I'll do that. But yeah, we're gonna have questions and comments at the end. I'll get to those, and then yeah, and then we'll end with a few more things, and then bada bing, bada boom. Let me get a sip here. Okay, so here's the thing, and we talk a lot about there's things we just don't know right now. So one of the there's a few possible treatments. So there you've heard hydroxychloroquine, which is a malaria fighting drug. There's remdesivir, which was originally designed to fight Ebola. It was used against SARS. And then there's convalescent plasma, which is sharing blood from people that have been infected by the virus, by SARS-CoV-2, and then have beaten it. And then there's also tocilizumab, which is a treatment for arthritis. I'm not sure my pronunciation on that, but there are some things right now that more tests need to be done. But there are 4 very, very promising treatments right now that may be able to be used to not only help those patients that already are infected and aren't doing well, but even those that aren't quite showing symptoms yet, but use it prophylactically. So use it before shit hits the fan as a way to mitigate the symptoms up front. So I'm optimistic about that. I'm also optimistic about the fact that we talked a little about this, that this R naught value. So in some of these things you're reading online, you might have seen this R. It's written R like subscript 0. It's pronounced R naught. Now I'm explaining this like I fucking know what it is. I just fucking learned about this like a week ago because I looked it up. But here's the deal: the R naught value just refers to how infectious a virus is. So something like measles, the R naught. So what it basically means is what's the likelihood? How many people are going to get infected? How many people are you going to? Is the average person going to infect? So if the R naught value is 5, that means each person on average is going to infect 5 people. Now that R naught value assumes that you're not doing social distancing, you're not doing a lot of these mitigation efforts. It just assumes in a regular world, how many people are you going to infect? So one of the things that we're seeing right now is it's possible. And we're seeing some indications that this is more infectious than we originally thought, which means that R naught value is higher than we thought. It's looked like it could be it could be over 5 at this point. So your average person's infecting 5 people. Now, this is a good thing in some ways because if it turns out it's a lot more infectious than we thought, and a lot more people actually have this, that means there's a far higher percentage of people that are asymptomatic. That means there's a far higher amount of people who are the case fatality rate is a lot lower, maybe even lower than the flu. The thing is, obviously at the beginning people were saying, "Oh, this isn't the flu," and that's still true. This absolutely is not the flu, simply because it's so infectious. So even if the case fatality rate is a lot lower than the flu, if more people are actually getting infected, then there's more havoc it's going to cause. So these are some things that, again, we won't know the official numbers on these things for a year or two, right? These are things that it takes a while to really know how many people had it, and what is the fucking deal. Again, we're operating in the dark right now, and we're trying to make the best, the most educated guesses we can right now. But that's where we're at. So these are just a couple little optimistic things I'm seeing, that are making me feel better about the situation. Again, as Howard Marks said, it's all about how you want to weigh this stuff. But if it turns out that everyone in New York basically already had it, for example, then that means that this notion of herd immunity, that means that people have already gotten it and they're not going to become carriers anymore. Now that's not even conclusive. It's possible we don't know. It might be possible you can get reinfected. But still, if a lot more people have been infected by this, that's actually not a bad thing. So we'll see. It's gonna take a while to see what the numbers are on that. So Bill Gates announced on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, he's helping fund 7 factories and work on 7 different vaccines, knowing that only 1 or 2 of those vaccines will probably be used, and there will be billions of dollars wasted on the other vaccines that will not be used. So here's the deal. I think in a lot of major issues, it comes back to billionaires. People say, oh, especially when the economy is not doing well, when we're talking about tax policy, a lot of big button issues, it comes to billionaires, right? It comes to, the billionaire, the famous Fukin, that line, every billionaire, I think Bernie Sanders says, every billionaire is a policy failure. So listen, here's what I will say, because I don't want to open up the whole billionaire can of worms. I've talked about it before, but here's what I will say. And here's, if you do believe billionaires are a policy issue, if you do believe they should not exist, I just ask you this: if Bill Gates wasn't a billionaire and his wealth was capped, would he be able to be doing this work with vaccines? Would the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation be able to build 7 factories to test, to come up with a vaccine, and potentially most of that money is going to be wasted on these factories? We don't know which vaccine is going to work out, but would that be possible if Bill Gates was not allowed to be a billionaire? So here's another thing I'll say. Some people say, well, if the government had more money, if these people were taxed appropriately, well, then they could do, maybe our services would be better, blah, blah, blah. The government just did 2.2, that 2.2 trillion CARES Act. The Fed is going nuts. Money's not the issue. If the government had a fucking $100 billion instead of Bill Gates, would they be building seven factories, being in the hopes that 1 or 2 of them would work? No, because if they want to do that, they would be doing that right now. So I think it's an interesting question, and I think that it's worth pointing out. If you don't believe that billionaires should exist, do you also believe that if they did not exist, would good things that billionaires are able to do? Now, I know I'm cherry picking here, but I'm just making the point. Would Bill Gates, if he did not have access to this wealth, would that money that was taxed from him, would that somehow lead to the U.S. government being able to do the same thing, or any government for that matter? So I think that's an interesting thing. And it's a question. I'm sure we got people in the comments that might say something to that. Okay, so here's a grim. Now this is the Economist talking. So we're at 1:23. Okay, we're gonna keep this under 2 hours here. So here's what I was talking about with this grim calculus that we haven't had to make right now. We've just shut everything down. We've said, boom, we shut everything down. Let's not. There hasn't really been a debate about opening up the economy right now. Now that we've shut it down, we're pretty much on board with that. We're still in the thick of it, as Collin Fedor said. He's for Massachusetts. He's looking at April 20 peak date. But there's going to be a time when it peaks and then it comes back down that we're going to have to make the decision. Okay, when do we start opening things up? So here's what they say. This is from The Economist. The article's a grim calculus, and I'll link to this. I'll link all this I'll link to all this stuff in the show notes. So the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, has declared that we're not going to put a dollar figure on human life. It was meant as a rallying cry from a courageous man whose state is overwhelmed. Yet by brushing trade-offs aside, Mr. Cuomo was in fact advocating a choice, one that does not begin to reckon with the litany of consequences among his wider community. It sounds hard-hearted, but a dollar figure on life, or at least some way of thinking systematically, is precisely what leaders will need if they are to see their way through the harrowing months to come. As in the hospital ward, trade-offs are unavoidable. So when it comes down to it, you don't have to, the cost of human life, there doesn't need to be a pandemic going on to have to make that calculus. So imagine this: if we could save, if we could add, take this as an example. If you could add a year to everyone's life by, let's just say, let's put a price of $1 billion on that. If everyone could live a year longer in the United States with $1 billion of economic, of money being sunk into that specifically, damn, we got a bug, would that be worth it? Now, $1 billion is a lot. I would say no, it wouldn't be. 100 million, probably not. No, it wouldn't be. That's a lot of fucking money that could be used for a lot of other things. Now, this is a contrived example. But my point is, there is a point at which you do need to think about the trade-offs. We're not there yet, but it is something that I think is going to become apparent in a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month, when there's going to be hard decisions that have to be made, and putting a dollar figure, as they said, on life, as coarse as that sounds, is going to help make policy decisions. So they go on to say there really is a trade-off, and for America today, the cost of a shutdown is far outweighed by the lives saved. However, America is fortunate to be rich. If India's lockdown fails to stop the spread of the disease, its choice will tragically point the other way. When one child is stuck down a well, the desire to help without limits will prevail, and so it should. But in a war or pandemic, leaders cannot escape the fact that every course of action will impose vast social and economic costs. To be responsible, you have to stack each against the other. Likewise, society must help the young after the pandemic has abated. Although the disease threatens them less severely, it's funny because you've just been hearing about, we need, the young people don't care, they're just spreading it and it's just killing the old people. But this is an interesting take. Although the disease threatens them less severely, most of the burden will fall on them, both today and in the future, as countries pay off their extra borrowing. So these governments are spending a lot of money to deal with this. And young people are going to end up fitting that bill. That's the reality. So year-long lockdowns would cost America and the Eurozone a third or so of GDP. Markets would tumble and investments be delayed. The capacity of the economy would wither as innovation stalled and skills decayed. Eventually, even if many people are dying, the cost of distancing could outweigh the benefits. That is a side of the trade-off that nobody is yet ready to admit. So I still think it's early to admit that. But we will see. We're gonna have to make these policy decisions in 2-3 weeks, a month from now. So The Economist also had a piece on, we talked about bailouts. A piece called "Bottomless Pit Incorporated." And we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but here's what they say. At least $8 trillion of state loans and goodies have been promised to private firms in America and Europe, roughly equivalent to all their profits over the past 2 years. Essential, but governments also need a clear framework to organize the jumble of schemes, protect taxpayers, and preserve the economy's dynamism. That $8 trillion is a big number and includes state and central bank loans, guarantees, and temporary subsidies to keep paying inactive workers. Total running costs of all American and Eurozone non-financial firms, excluding payments to each other, are $13.5 trillion a year, of which $11.6 trillion is wages. So that's pretty crazy. There's $13.5 trillion a year. That's the running cost of American and Eurozone non-financial firms. So $8 trillion is how much in call it stimulus has been passed out. Just to put that in perspective. So the cost of extending unlimited credit to all firms is unsustainable, and the economy must eventually adjust to new circumstances. For example, e-commerce firms need more workers, whereas cinemas may never fully recover. The one rule that governments should impose is to ban firms getting bespoke deals from paying cash to shareholders through dividends and buybacks until state loans are repaid. So this is what I talked about at the beginning of that interview on CNBC that I linked to that I answered with Chapath from Social Capital. He was saying that he made the point that this isn't enough. That even if So I think it's important to call out the bespoke deals are individual deals that targeted specific companies. So far in the United States, it's been pretty broad ranging, but the airlines have gotten about $50 billion specifically to them, that were special deals to keep them afloat. With, I think, 75% of the money that went to them had to go directly toward payroll, so paying the employees. Chapath's point was that it's not enough if you basically bail these guys out and then force them not to pay cash to shareholders through dividends and buybacks until the state loans are repaid. Well, they've been doing buybacks for the last 10 years and raising debt for 10 years while business was doing well. So it's he doesn't think that's enough. So it's an interesting. Again, I don't have answers to this. I don't want. It's really it's easy to come on here and get everyone excited and be like, oh, the government burn it down, the big corporations burn it down. Listen, I'm not trying to get anyone excited about anything. What I am trying to do is ask the questions. I'm trying to talk through this shit, because it is this is tough stuff, and I'm not just going to take a single straight fucking line on it, because frankly, we don't have the information to do that right now. I want to make sure to you guys, when I'm pretty sure about something, when I know something, when I genuinely feel something, I'm gonna fucking say it. Right now, I'm in the question phase with all this stimulus stuff. I really am. So we'll continue. This year, we will see state intervention in business on an unprecedented scale. With luck, it will not be remembered as the year in which dynamism and free markets died. So that to me is one of the questions going on in my head right now. The people, capitalism is private ownership of the means of production, right? That's what it is. It's a political and it's an economic philosophy. That what government intervention with, people get pissed, at what's going on. They got pissed during the global financial crisis. They get pissed at what the government's doing. But that's not capitalism, right? That is the government intervening and not letting the market work itself out. Now, I'm not saying the government shouldn't intervene. I'm just saying that people look at these bailouts and they say capitalism has failed. That's not capitalism. That's a Frankenstein version of it that maybe sometimes for the greater good it needs to the government needs to step in, but overall it's a dangerous thing to do. And we talked about this at the beginning. If the government is willing to intervene when shit hits the fan, is that going to make the people running these companies a little less judicious, a little less prudent in how they manage them? And Chapath's point in his interview, he was saying that it's that the people, especially with regards to the Fed now buying junk bonds, the people that were going to lose money on those junk bonds are in his mind, or what he was saying was hedge funds, right? This isn't your average everyday American that's going to lose money because the junk bonds defaulted. People knowingly took risk buying these junk bonds, and now the government's coming in and going to purchase them and get them off their books. That's a hell of a thing that's going to make not only companies a little less judicious, but maybe traders a little less judicious if they think that the government's going to be there to bail them out. Now, this is, again, I'm not giving a prescription on this. I'm reading a lot of things about it. I'm surprised that a lot of the mainstream sources, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, are not really, besides their op-eds kind of stuff, they're not really kind of laying out what the deal is with it. These are very serious trade-offs. They're very serious questions about about how much the government should intervene in these things. So here's the okay. Then we're gonna get one more thing in. I thought this was interesting. One more thing on some of the oil crisis that's going on right now. The oil crisis is a huge deal right now. That would be a huge story in its own right, but the fucking pandemic's going on, so people aren't really talking about it as much. So then, Charlie, we're going to queue up questions or any comments or anything people got. We're going to queue up. So I'm going to talk about this for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to end with I'm going to end with a couple things after we do the questions, comments, if there are any, and then we're gonna go on. We're gonna have a good day. We're gonna enjoy ourselves. Okay, so here's the deal. Here's Zihan. He has a newsletter. It's called Zihan on Geopolitics, which I recommend. I highly recommend you take a look at. It's a really interesting newsletter. And he says this: all told, as of March 31st, the total decline in global oil demand appeared to be at least 15 million barrels per day, out of pre-virus total of about 100 million barrels per day. Even if the decline is only 15 million barrels per day, this is the largest decline in demand in both absolute and relative terms in the history of petroleum, and it all occurred in under 3 months, with the bulk of it in less than 3 weeks. So it's fucking unprecedented. And then he talks about so Saudi Arabia. The more I read about Saudi Arabia, the more it just blows my mind that this is even a fucking country. Their governing system is crazy. They're able to stay in power because they make a shit ton of money off of oil. And MBS, their new hotshot leader it's crazy what some of the things he's done to remain in power, or to even get to the throne. And this is what Peter Zihan says. He says, and from time to time, MBS likes to liquidate this or that prince from the branches of the family that used to have the run of the kingdom and take all their stuff. The Saudi royal family literally has hundreds of thousands of princes, so there's a lot of financial heft just laying around for emergencies like this one. So it's just he's talking about own family members who can put under house arrest and forcing them to transfer their assets to the state. It's pretty crazy. And again, we've talked about Russia's system. Russia's system for delivering oil. A lot of their pipe systems terminate in ports on the Baltic Sea, Black Sea, and the Sea of Japan. The Saudis are targeting these markets specifically. So they're going into where Russia typically sells its oil, and the Saudis are going in there and selling that oil for rock bottom prices because they were not able to make a deal to limit oil production. You hear about OPEC, Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, which is just one big price fixing cabal. Russia did not agree. They're not part of OPEC. But they still work with OPEC, or at least pretend to limit supply, so that the prices remain stable and profitable. So that's a super fucking interesting thing going on there with the oil fucking war right now that's going on. And he also talked about the fact that it's possible for oil prices to go to zero, and even negative. So he talks about the fact that it's hard to production of oil doesn't just spin up and spin down. Once it's up and running, you can't just turn it off with the flip of the switch. It's going to keep going. So what do you do if no one's using the oil like they are now? Well, you got to store it somewhere. What happens when the storage runs out and you got to put it somewhere? You're going to start paying people to store it. So it's going to be there's literally going to be a negative price of oil is what he's predicting. Now this guy makes some pretty bold predictions. So I'd be curious if this actually plays out. But and we'll be able to see that. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, here we got questions, comments. Let me know if we got anything here, Brother Beast. Looks like we got some stuff in the comments here. So let me know if I'm not gonna look through the comments. Charlie, you there? Brother Beast, hit me. So I'm going to talk about a couple more things. So there's anecdotal evidence that I've seen this a lot. So I've seen Fukin. There was this viral clip of a woman that was going to church that was saying, I'm going to church. I don't care about Fukin. I'm going to church. I'm going to keep meeting with people. This was, I think, a couple weeks ago. And it kind of went viral because it's like, oh, look at, people going to church. They don't care about spreading the virus, blah blah blah. And then I've also seen things of individual doctors giving their personal takes on what they're seeing in the hospital. So I saw some really scary things. People saying, I've never seen anything like this, like the chest X-rays, blah blah blah. it's important to get people's individuals perspective, and I like, we had Silvia on, we had Collin on. Those individual perspectives are important, but I think what they're often done is they're used, they're often used as a way to uh, scare people. So rather than talk about, okay, not just what's going on in this hospital, what's going on across all hospitals? What is the broad data showing us? Not this one person had this one horrible reaction, or this one super young fit person died from coronavirus. Yes, young people are going to die from COVID-19, but it doesn't mean we need to prop these stories up and scare people. And same with that. With that church going video, it's like, I'm down to dunk on religion as much as the next guy, but it's just hilarious that people like prop the, oh, look at these people going to church. It's like, okay, this was one interview that CNN did with one woman who's going to church. It's like, is this some massive thing of everyone's still going to church? And it's like, no. So individual perspectives are absolutely important, but when they're used and paraded around to kind of show, almost act as, or make people think it's the general case, I think it's disingenuous. Okay, so we've got a couple questions. One, okay, we got from Bettini. Here we go. The point of op-eds is to share interesting opinions, ideas, thoughts. What they is not the voice of the news organization. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. This is an article from the editorial board. I'll have to ask, because the purpose of an editorial board is different than the purpose of the op-ed section. Okay. Yes, it doesn't represent the news organization. I see what you're saying on that. And yes, I don't actually know the difference when the editorial board puts something out. How is that different than the voice? The editorial board voice versus the op-ed voice versus the news organization as a whole. I am saying this, though, that when the New York Times puts a stamp on something, that you trust, the New York Times is a brand. You trust that the ideas they're putting out are in good faith. They're well researched, and they're not just saying things to get people fired up. So oftentimes I think that, especially during the Mueller report, when the Mueller report came out, when I was trying to find a good understanding, I was looking at the New York Times, I was looking at the Wall Street Journal. It was crazy. There were a lot of op-eds on it. There were a lot of fucking opinion pieces on it, and it was hard for me to find, in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, both of these, it was hard for me to find an actual an honest kind of journalistic approach to it. It was a choose your own adventure story. The Wall Street Journal had multiple different opinions. I remember specifically multiple different opinion articles people wrote on the Mueller report, that so you could, whatever your biases were, you could read that op-ed, you could read this op-ed, you could read this op-ed. Now, it's good to get perspectives out there, but at a certain point, it's up to the news organization, as the people that work in this field. They're journalists. It is their duty to give people a factual representation of what's going on. So that kind of blows my mind. Yeah. So I appreciate you chiming in on that. Okay. So I also want to end with this. It's about 1:42. Okay, we're doing good on time. I want to end with this. We talked about this at the beginning of the show. I'm going to keep repeating things. I repeat things I think are important, because if you miss it once, boom. How do we learn? How do we talk about things? How do we grow? Well, a lot of times we got to repeat things. So I'm going to repeat this. We are currently in the midst of a situation where we are in a dark Fukin tunnel. There are a lot of unknowns. In any situation where there are a lot of unknowns, there are going to be messiahs, people that claim to know the correct answer, or claim to know something 100%, or claim to know we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, and they don't just phrase it as a hypothesis. They phrase it as a solution, and flat out. And yes, there are many solutions. Testing, for example, that is one thing I think we can all agree on, that the jury's out on that. But there's a lot of things, especially when it comes to two things right now: COVID-19 and also the markets. There are and the government intervention. There are things right now being done that are truly extraordinary, that are going to take a couple years for us to really suss out. So anytime, I urge you during this time, anytime you see someone that's saying, "Oh, the bailouts are for sure bad," or "Oh, we need to do the bailouts. We need to stimulate the economy. The government needs to print more money," I would be very, very cautious if anyone's saying things like that, because we don't know the effects of this. The stimulus tap was opened in 2008 with the global financial crisis. That was unprecedented government intervention. And maybe it needed to happen. Maybe it didn't. Maybe some of those companies that would have failed should have just failed. Maybe some of the auto companies should have gone bankrupt. Maybe, or maybe that would have absolutely destroyed the economy. And who the fook knows what would happen. The problem with economic stuff is that we don't have the counterfactual. We can't just run an experiment in the lab. We can't try one thing and then in the same exact situation try a different set of inputs. We don't have that. We don't have that luxury. So all we can do is focus on the questions. I think during this time we have to focus on asking the right questions. And yes, we won't get conclusive answers, and we need to be okay with not getting conclusive answers. But we need to, at the very least, not focus on put the emphasis on the answer. We need to focus on the emphasis on the question, because a lot of these answers, a lot of these questions are unknowable at this time. So we need to stay open. We need to allow other inputs to come in and not just get cornered into opinion, cornered into idea that we think is absolutely correct. And some of these things, even in 2 years, we just won't know. Maybe in 2 years, we're just going to have the same debate that we had during the global financial crisis, where 3 years, 4 years later, we say, yeah, we think it was probably the right thing to do, but we don't know. Maybe we won't have conclusive answers. I would just cautious, be wary of anyone giving conclusive answers to things that are unknowable. There are some things unknowable, and we should give conclusive answers to those things. But there are things that are unknowable, and we need to be very careful with those things. And we need to focus on asking the right questions and not giving and not focus on coming to an answer as soon as possible, because some of those things, they take time, or some of those things are unknowable, and we just have to operate a little bit in the dark. That's life, and that's unfortunately, it's not always 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, so thank you, everyone. This has been Dick Lucas, Shooting from the Hip number 8. We do this live every Saturday at noon Eastern time. It will be available on wherever you get your podcasts as well. Charlie Finley is the producer, editor. Support on Patreon. The show notes are available on YouTube and in the show notes of your podcasting app. Also, if you want the full raw show notes, the ones that I use to conduct the show, the ones that I have in my hand right here, you can, if you become a Patreon supporter, at least $5 a month, then you can get full raw access to those. I just give you access to the Google Docs that I use for this. I really appreciate it. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for coming on. Hour 50, under 2 hours. Love it. Respect, one love. We got 15 live streamers. Really appreciate everyone coming out. We're gonna keep doing this. Again, give me your feedback. I'm gonna read through the comments after the show. Give me your feedback. We want to keep this going. Let me know what you think of the dick@nogradient.com if you have any feedback. Want to know what you thought of the interviews. How was the audio quality? Shit like that. So thank you, everyone. Keep an open mind. Don't try to know the unknowable. Just wade in the uncertainty and be comfortable with that. Why? Because that's going to allow you to find the correct answer when the correct answer reveals itself. Don't try to force the answer when we don't have the information. Wade in the uncertainty. Wade in it. Let the answers come when they need to. Thank you all. Shooting from the Hip number 8, Dick Lucas, No Gradient Podcast, Charlie Finley, producer. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed weekend. Ciao.